Welcome to the Manitowish Waters Historical Society's interview with Marlene Desris Douglas and her brother Drake Douglas. This interview was conducted on June 24th, 2020 at their Trout River home. As you look at the map below, the Desris or Douglas family first came to Betzer's Alder Lake Resort on the old Loveless property and enjoyed many summers there. Ultimately, they purchased property as one of the first property owners in the area on the Trout River. Starting in about 1940, the Douglas family spent 2 weeks at Betzer's Resort. The beaches and fishing were legendary, and the family gathered year after year. Ultimately, the family bought property in the early 1950s as one of the first property owners in the region. You can see the arrow on the right illustrating the large bend in the river where the Douglas family enjoyed their summers on their own property. You can also look at the photo on the left, which is from 1956, showing very dense wild rice throughout the area. That will continue for some years until it disappears. We hope you enjoy the interview, and the Manitowish Waters Historical Society welcomes you to come and explore our website and our online archival records, which are free for you to use. Thank you. And introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Marlene Desris, formerly Douglas.
I'm her brother, Drake Douglas. My dad was the original owner of this building.
Very good. And you started coming up here as a family when?
What did we say, 80 years ago?
Yeah, 80 years ago.
1940, and
yeah.
you stayed at a resort.
Betzer's Resort.
Betzer's Resort on Alder Lake, which is now, was bought up by Dikensky, and that is now 3 properties. It was 1 property original.
Alrighty, so your parents started the tradition.
Yes.
Okay. And from Kenosha, you guys came up because you knew the owners of the property.
Correct. Our aunt and uncle were the neighbors of Betzer's.
Very good. Can you tell me a little bit what Betzer's property looked like when you arrived there?
Beautiful pine trees. All pine trees. The beach was gorgeous. All sand. And every night the men went out fishing, and they never came back without a fish. No outboard motors. They would row out to the middle of the lake and fish. And they would come back with strings of fish, beautiful fish.
And when you were there as children, you were rather young.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
What were your favorite activities?
Swimming.
Right. And then we'd go to Betzer's house and buy grape soda.
Yep.
Grape soda.
And the pine trees back then were only about that big around, and we could push them over by hand, and till we got hell for that. That was kind of a game with us kids.
And the one thing I do remember is where the howling dog is.
Yes.
That was Marty Kane's.
Tell me about that. I don't know about that.
They had a live bear in a cage outside, right next to the tavern.
And at 5, at 8 years old, that had to be pretty special.
Oh yes, oh yes. And then we'd go in, and our dad would buy us grape knee-high
Okay.
peanuts. Remember?
Yep.
And you could buy a bottle of, I don't remember what the liquid was, to feed the bear.
And do you remember anything about Marty Kane?
Oh yeah, the original floor is still there. The door is still there. The ceiling is the original.
Right. The owner himself, the famous guide, Marty Kane?
You know, I don't remember too much about him because I was so little. I only remember the bear and the grape knee-high soda.
Okay. That's fantastic.
And that was actually the only place at that time. I mean, do you remember the laundromat Alder's?
Mm-hmm.
They
Yes.
came after that.
Right.
And when they were kind of a store there.
First they had the store,
Yeah,
and then they made part of it the laundromat. They were such wonderful people. I remember when my first son was born, Mark, the only phone was at Ehlert's grocery store. And she came all the way out here to tell my mother and dad that Mark had been born.
Fantastic.
They were wonderful people. 'Cause
So-
there were no phone lines, no electric, no gas. Our place originally was just to that doorway, and then our uncle used to build motors. So he built us a, what would you call it? Some kind of a little,
weed cutter.
no, he built a motor so that we could have electric between the
Oh.
two places.
Generator.
A generator. He built a generator for us. So we could have electric, which we were the only ones that had electric because of that.
That's pretty special.
Yeah.
So Ehlert's was very important because you'd
Oh,
have to
yes.
get your laundry done because you had no running water,
Oh,
no
nothing.
flush
We had a
toilets
pump
at
in the
Belzer's.
sink.
Okay.
Pump in the sink. We have one outside. And you know what? We had a great time. We used to water ski here.
Right here off of the
Right
Trout
here.
River.
There were no regulations. My father, we had the aluminum fishing boat, and he was good enough that he could maneuver in this bay, and we used to all water ski right off our pier.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
When we first were going to that Betzer's, my dad and uncle had come up the river fishing, but it was so full of wild
Let me
rice
show you the picture.
that
Okay.
you only had about a 10 or 12 foot opening of clear water to drive your boats in.
Now, what year was that?
Well, they bought it.
Oh,
I don't have a date
I
on the
left home at
picture.
18, so it's sometime before that.
Oh yeah, there is a date here.
About 15, 85 years ago.
Okay.
1956.
1956. Can we see the picture,
This
please?
picture was from 1950. That's how it looked when they bought it.
Okay. And there it is. And there's all the wild rice in front of your property on Alder Lake. Now, at that same time, I've heard this story before from Bobby McClellan, whose family was raised here, and he talked about that in the 90s. Remember when the channel between Wild Rice Lake and Alder Lake was just a narrow little opening
Yep.
that
Yes.
you could barely get through?
Like
Yep.
this.
That's exactly right. Boy, we'd love to scan that later. Thank
Yes.
you.
I have more pictures, but they're in California. This is the only one I have here.
Well, we'll take that now, and if you bring them back in the future, we would
Yes.
just scan them
You know,
quickly
from-
because yes, absolutely. This is
Yep.
grand.
And it was years that this wild rice was grown.
Do you recall why the wild rice went away?
I don't know,
I don't know either.
but I know it was so bad you couldn't get boats in and out hardly from your dock. And my uncle built a weed cutter
Okay.
to help clear it out in front of our dock so we could get out to the channel.
So this was in the 1940s and the early 1950s.
Yeah.
This is the way it was here.
But we loved it.
Oh yeah. And you were able to water ski through that stuff?
Well, no, it was after the wild rice
Right.
was down. Then we could water ski.
Most people argue, and I remember being a little boy here in 1963, it was the rusty crayfish that ate all those weeds. Because when I showed
Yes.
up, there were very few weeds anywhere and crayfish everywhere.
And you know what happened is, a couple of fellas came by and introduced them into the water.
Did you see that, or was that just a story that you...
No, we had seen them, but they started over, well, we saw them over on the other side over there.
Really?
And then it became, and I think that's probably where some of the rice went.
Okay. All right. So at Betzer's, would you stay a week? 2
2
weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks
They
because it
finally got
was,
2 weeks vacation,
and you know, it was a long drive up from Kenosha. The
How
rest
long
of
was it?
8 hours.
8 hours.
Okay.
You know, it was all Tulane.
Yes, yes, yes. You have to go through every little town.
And I can
The
remember
black-
gas rationing.
Right.
They saved stamps all year so that we could get up here.
The blacktop stopped at Tomahawk.
All right, so it was all sand and mud from there
Yeah.
on out? Little gravel?
Yep. Dustier than hell.
I bet in the summertime it was. I bet it was.
But we had so much fun because Betzers didn't care how many people you had
Okay.
in the cottage because there was no water issue or septic or any of that. So all our families would come up. So the whole family would come up. My mother had what, 2, 3 brothers and sisters, and they were kids. So we had a grand time. Grand time.
It sounded like a great time.
It was. It really was.
We kept our fish in the ice house.
There was an ice house there.
Yep, you had to go down through the sawdust to get to
Right.
the ice, and you lay your fish on the ice and cover it up. Put a stake for a marker.
Wow, that's different than it is today by
Yeah.
quite a bit.
It was ice that they cut out of the lakes.
And I was asking him, I remember my mother talking about there was a dance hall on Alder Lake.
Yes, there was. Just down, and that was owned by the Lovelace family.
Was that around the Alderwood Resort in that area?
No, it was down on Tom Bear's property right now. His
Oh.
house is right where the pavilion and dance hall was.
Okay.
It was something special in the 1920s, but it collapsed under snow load sometime after that. And he'd have big bands up here and Native American powwows, and he would have African American bands.
You know,
And
we were not here when that was going on, but my mother talked about
Yeah.
that dance hall.
so how did she know about it? Did she come up
You know,
previously?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. When we first came up being young kids, they might have even gone to a dance hall.
Oh, right. Right.
I don't know. They were young
You know,
enough to
yeah,
go.
I don't know either.
That, I have no recollection about that.
Understandable, but it's a great story, isn't it? A lot was going on there. There was a sawmill at what was Johnson's Resort that was formerly Lovelace Resorts. All of it was Lovelace's
Yeah,
at one
Oh,
I
point.
okay.
remember that.
But we've also been told, and I've never had anybody outside the Historical Society confirm it, that the Lovelace family moved that sawmill up by Marty Kane's, up by Highway, what's now Highway 51, formerly Highway 10. Did you ever see the sawmill that would have been just to the west?
Of Marty Kane?
Yeah.
That I don't remember. Do
Okay.
you?
No.
I'm trying to think about it.
I
No
remember
big
the
deal.
bear.
Okay. Well, let's talk about you guys and what your family enjoyed to do. I love those stories.
Oh, all we did was swim and have fun and go get grape knee-high and go down to Marty Kane's, and the guys fished every single night. And with all the family there, we just were running around and having a good time.
So then you bought this property in the early
My father-
1950s.
My father bought it. He rode down here because they didn't have motors then.
Correct?
So he rode all the way down here and found this place. It was owned by a church.
Okay.
And the 200 feet. So like I said, my uncle bought 100 feet and my dad bought the other 100. And when they started building, other than Runge and the cabin that Larry Nervy eventually bought, I don't know who owned it before Larry. Those were the only 2 places up here.
Mm-hmm.
So it was completely wild.
Mhm.
Completely.
Now there was a road into the Levine homestead.
The roads are exactly the same as they were then,
Okay.
except they weren't paved.
Right.
Because they had the road, the driveway, of course, plowed,
Mhm.
and otherwise the roads were the same, weren't they?
Yeah, as I remember them, yeah.
Because on the point where, do you remember Altos? Did you know Altos?
Yes.
Okay, their point, I can't remember the people that owned that. She used to sit every night on the bench and fish. And so the roads are the same as far as, other than being paved.
Okay. Very
Oh,
good.
I remember. We used to walk up to Marty Kane's
Yes,
As kids.
yes, from Betzer's, yeah.
from Betzer's, get something to drink and eat.
Grape knee-high, or an orange crush. That's how I remember that.
So when the adults were here, other than fishing, what other activities did they do when you were children?
We just hung around the resort, played
Yeah.
games or cards, or sat around every night and talked. And
Well, we got together because
yeah,
no television.
no
Right.
Back then, when we
television.
first came up here, everybody sat around the radio if there
Okay.
was something big going on. So to get up here like this, it was just relaxing and
There was no radio because there was no electricity.
yeah.
Right. And so you played cards and just
It was
enjoyed family.
Family, and, you know, no
Campfires?
television. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So,
Things that families nowadays don't know how to do.
No. Well, talked about the water skiing. We were in the garage and they got some of the original water skis that they used
I'd love to take pictures of those.
still in the garage.
They're
Should I,
open.
should I take them down from the
Sure,
rafters?
if you can get
I'd
them
love
down.
to take pictures of those. Thank you so much.
I think there is a lamp that was on the wall that was our light. So what would
Yeah.
that have been? Kerosene?
Could have been, yeah.
An oil lamp that was the light in
Oh,
here.
you might be interested. We got the original outhouse out there too.
I'm one of the last ones to retain it.
What house? Log?
Outhouse.
Outhouse.
You
Oh
know
yeah.
what an
Sure.
outhouse is?
Well, no, I didn't hear you.
Oh,
I know what
yeah.
an outhouse is. Yes.
Yeah.
We got the original one.
Well, good.
Well, and that's what we had to use at Betzer's too.
Oh yeah. And on my property, when we dug the basement, we found remnants of several outhouses because
Yeah.
they just dig a new hole and move the outhouse
Right,
over.
right.
So,
I've had it re-roofed, painted.
and it's still operational.
Yes, the kids use it.
Okay.
And you know, when the electric goes out, it comes in handy.
I bet it does.
Because I don't have a generator here.
Okay. Did you ever work here or spend your summers here once you bought the
No.
property?
No. Because when my father bought it, my husband and I had just gotten married and he was in
Okay.
the service.
All right.
So we were living elsewhere when he was in the service, and then when he got out of the service, we would come up here in the summers with the kids when they were little.
So when you think about the chain now and the chain of lakes back then, what are the 3 or 4 things that have changed the most?
Well, the amount of houses and the size of the houses, and the number of boats per property.
I haven't been here for a few years, but the thing that I noticed the most is the trees have gotten so much taller than I remember them.
Talk about that, please.
Well, it seems like they're about 30 feet taller and a lot more pine trees than I remember. Because a lot of this country was cut off for pulp. And it's second and third growth that you see around here now. And I was just telling my sister this morning, it looks like somebody's going to get an idea of saying, hey, there's a lot of lumber in this woods that needs to be cut down. And it's going to happen sometime, I think.
Yeah,
Well,
probably
my
will.
husband had the rule, if we cut down a tree, we planted 2.
Very good.
So all those trees in between these houses are a lot of them that he had planted.
That's
The cranberry marsh has really expanded.
yeah. They started in '45,
Yeah.
kind of when you came up here, but they have grown considerably, and they're on our side
There
of
was,
town.
there was just a few beds.
Right.
In fact, right down here going to Spider Lake, there was the first cranberry beds around here.
Spider Lake?
Wild
Or,
rice.
Wild rice?
Wild rice.
Wild
Yeah,
rice,
on
okay.
Kohler's Marsh. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first cranberry bog that you could see from the road. But
So you were here before the bridge or the tube was in over the river as well.
no, it was always there.
It was always there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to have fun with some people. If they would follow us when we were going into wild rice and going through the tube, if they were following right behind us with no restrictions, we could go as fast as we wanted. The second boat coming through would almost get swamped from the water coming up the tube and back down.
So being a local had its advantages. You,
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew to wait
Yeah,
for the outwash to get out of the tube, huh?
Well, and
we
back then there were no restrictions on anything.
Yeah.
You could cut a tree down, you could do whatever you wanted. But there was, like I say, there was only 4 of us up here. In this bay right here.
In the bay, yeah.
No.
So, were there any families that you became friends with at your time up here, or?
Well, since my father bought this place, neighbors have built on each side, and of course my aunt and uncle lived next door until they passed, and then they passed it on to their children. So then their children passed it on to their children. So they're on the grandchildren now.
Okay.
The ownership is in the grandchildren. Oh yeah, great memories with Nerbies. Oh my gosh, parties, and all the good times. You know, everybody was so friendly. Everybody got together. We didn't sit in the house and watch TV.
Okay.
You go outside and you spend time with your friends and your neighbors.
Well, grand.
It was just wonderful.
Do you have any big fish stories from back in the day, if your family liked to fish?
Actually, Mark should be here because his wife, have you met Terry?
Yes.
Okay.
Get the certificate off of the wall.
It's probably dusty. Dust it off, Kelly.
It says Vilas County, home of the Fighting Muskie, and it says that,
Henry Douglas.
okay, Henry Douglas on the 19th caught a muskie in Vilas County waters. I don't see the size of it. It says 6600 19th, Kenosha, Wisconsin. So he caught a big muskie. How big was it?
I don't know.
You know, I don't know either.
But you said they gave them to when people caught a muskie, they
Yeah.
received one of those.
Yeah,
So was
he's up to
muskie the
beach.
primary thing that they were after, or did they
Walleyes and perch.
walleyes and perch?
Yeah, I
Well,
was.
muskies was big fishing. It's still big fishing here. So once you got your muskie, you can
Oh,
kind
it's
of relax. But
creative.
until you caught one, you was, I gotta catch a muskie. I gotta get a muskie.
Ben Guthrie. Do you remember him?
Who?
Ben Guthrie was president of the Vilas County Chamber of Commerce.
Ben Guthrie is a leading figure and historian from the Lac du Flambeau area. He was actually my mentor in my master's thesis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he is.
I think we had to go up to the highway.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bait store. I think it's a little farther south on 51.
Okay.
And you would register when you caught a fish there, and that's where you got the certificate from, I think.
Well, it's fabulous. A true heirloom for the family and the cabin. So, as we kind of conclude here, what's the most important thing about the Northwoods experience for your family? Why did this place make such a difference?
Well, it's a different world when you come here from a city. The air is clean. You can't beat looking out at the water in the woods. It's just so relaxing.
Well, I always wanted to come to the North Woods, and not here, but over on the Chippewa Flow. I used to be a hunting fishing guide.
Okay.
So I just wanted to be up in the woods. It was, I don't know, good.
Well, even for me as a kid, I'm 52, it was like they said, stuff we didn't do back home. You know, that was exciting.
And it's a generational tradition that you have.
Yeah.
Well, now Mark and Terry have a place up here. He was here for a while, but now he lives in Minnesota, and my sister is in California. But I still come back, and I live in California too, but I still come back every year.
Okay.
David comes up quite a bit.
Yes, I have a son now, David, that's in Pleasant Prairie, Kenosha, Wisconsin. And he feels the same way about it, because
And are
he and Mark, we brought them up here since they were babies. And they would come in the summer. I would put them on the train in Kenosha, pack them a lunch, and they used to take the train from Kenosha and get off at Woodruff. Or at Manitowish by the Dingling.
Right.
And they would spend 2-3 weeks up here with Grandma and Grandpa.
And that was some very special time.
Oh, yes.
That story is like my family, just it wasn't the train, it was automobiles.
And I think that's why, like David and Mark are still so tuned into the Northwoods, because they've been coming up here since they were babies.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a fantastic story and a lovely property. And thank you for sharing all of this.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we'll take some pictures and so on. And if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to.
Oh, well, we've got a lot of stories. It's just a matter of bringing them to mind.
I understand. Well, it's a great first step.